My Jets family, I'm back. I want to thank you guys for tuning in to the Take Flight Spit and Fire podcast. I had a good time down in South Carolina with my parents. It was a good week. Happy to be back with you guys now and happy to be talking about them Jets. So today was the first Jets training camp practice. Training camp finally opened up. The pads are finally on. And in the first training camp practice, and kind of a little before one of these, there are two major stories that I believe have come out of even just the first day, or even one that's interesting to talk about. So I'm going to talk about both of them with you guys in two different segments. The other one, if you guys want to tune into the other show I put up on my channel, the other show I put up on my channel as well, the other episode. But for this one, we're going to talk about Mr. Mekhi Becton, because that's a big story right now, right? I mean, you guys remember we had my episode about a month ago or so. It was the live one where we talked together, we interacted, had a chat on Monday where we talked about Mekhi Becton and what was perceived, and as we saw, as the weight problem that he had, and we talked about it. And this is good news. I want to preface it with very good news. Maybe you've heard it, but I want to start with going back to what we talked about in that episode, where I know a lot of people we talked about were very polarized, right? A lot of people felt very decisively, one way or another. I was very torn, if you guys remember, right? I was very torn in feeling, okay, well, here's a guy, quick, long story short. And again, the episode, actually, if you guys want to check it out, I'm going to put it in the, excuse me, I'm going to put it in the comments down below so you can check out that live episode, the interactive one we had, where we talked about Mekhi Becton about a month ago. But if you guys remember, again, a lot of people were very polarized on it, feeling one way or another. I was really torn. Because again, here's a guy, again, we talked about, top pick that I loved. I liked him. I wanted him. I felt he could be a great tackle. He was my favorite tackle in that draft. We look at what he did in his rookie year. He was outstanding. I talked about how I felt he wasn't injury prone, how it just took him a long time to come back from his injury. But then the weight thing we talked about. And if you guys remember, we talked about how I said, I hate the idea of fat shaming. But again, you got a guy, big paid NFL athlete, he's got to show that he could be that guy, especially the 11th overall pick. And that's what, again, the polarizing of the topic came to that, right? This was the 11th overall pick in the draft, a guy that the Jets paid high draft capital to get, a guy that, again, we've had, Joe Douglas has shown, believe me, he's shown in these last two drafts, he knows how to draft. He knows how to find guys. But you don't want that first draft to be, he blew it on his first pick, because that's a high draft capital pick. Excuse me. So we talked about, Mekhi Becton working out in the offseason with Duke Manyweather, right? But when he came back, we all saw it and people talked about it. He was overweight, right? Connor Hughes pointed it out, right? Pointed out that if it were a big thing that, he'd come back at the weight they'd wanted and he was perfect and ready to go, they would have said that, right? They would have talked about that. Excuse me. So the big news, and here's the good news, and this is what it all comes down to. And if you guys remember, I ended that whole thing with, we'll see, right? It came down to me, and I even challenged Mekhi Becton, if you remember. You guys, again, I'll post the link to the episode. I actually challenged him, and he accepted the challenge. It really was perfect. I said, well, Mekhi, you've proven you can be the guy when you're on the field, right? You've proven you're an excellent athlete and a great football player. But you now have to show your dedication to your craft. You have to show your dedication to the fan base, the team that gave the 11th overall pick for you. And that would be showing up in better shape. And again, I said I was surprised. All offseason, we saw him benching 400 pounds and, excuse me, lifting like crazy amounts of weight and carrying it around the gym. I was like, man, he's going to come back shredded. And I said, it could be, again, his wife was pregnant. Maybe she was eating a lot because she was pregnant with the baby. Maybe he was eating with her. I don't know. Whatever it was, he didn't come back in shape, and that upset a lot of people. And my challenge was, again, Mekhi, you have a month, right? You don't have to come back perfect, right? You don't have to come back looking like a twig. Like, we don't want that. We just want you to lose a couple of pounds. Even if it's just, let's just show your dedication, right, to the craft. Well, as everyone's talked about, and that's the big news, we saw yesterday when the Jets veterans reported to training camp. Today was the first practice. Yesterday was when they reported. And they like to put pictures up, and everyone's reporting in. There was a picture of Mekhi that surfaced. And the picture of Mekhi, he looked good. Like, he looked like he noticeably lost some weight. And that's what we're going to be talking about here, because that's huge. That's big. If you guys remember, that was my big thing in that episode, right? We talked about how when he's on the field, the talent level's there. In his rookie season alone, we thought he should have been a Pro Bowler, right? We were saying that he looked like a Pro Bowler in his rookie season, putting up I believe around 74 or so in every category in BFF average. He looked very good. And as we know, forced out with his shoulder, all that. We're not going to get into the injury stuff, but we knew he was ready to go. We knew, like, okay, he's ready to go. But then the weight thing came about. And again, that was, my challenge. Show your dedication. And that is exactly what we've seen. So again, the image is surfaced. If you guys haven't seen it, you can look on, the Jets website. It's all over Twitter. Image surfaced of Mekhi in better shape, and he showed it today. He showed up at camp, and he's in noticeably better shape. And that is the topic of conversation. The beauty of Mekhi Becton doing exactly what we challenged him to do, right? Exactly the challenge of, well, show us again your dedication to your craft, your dedication to the fans, to the team, to being an NFL caliber top athlete. We know your talent's there when it's on the field, and he showed that. So when Robert Saleh was interviewed, so I want to bring up to you guys as well. So again, today was the first training camp. They asked Robert Saleh a lot of questions. They were pretty much all about Mekhi Becton because that was a big story, right? Everyone saw him in better shape yesterday, and was like, wow, like this has been the challenge I issued. It's pretty much like, I don't know if you watched the episode, but it's pretty much like he accepted it, right? He's like, he knew he had to come in. He has to come in better shape if he's going to play at the NFL level as a top tackle at the NFL level. So when they asked Robert Saleh about it, Robert Saleh said, we felt really good that Mekhi was here. And he stressed that he'd been here since minicamp. He only missed 1 week, and that was July 4th weekend. And really no one's pointed this out, but I noticed, if you guys remember, I tweeted out the video as well. Mekhi put out a workout video on July 4th weekend working with Duke Manyweather. That was the time we found out as well, when remember that Duke came forward, as we talked about, and said that he wakes up at 4 a.m., right, and pushes and pulls sleds for an hour straight. All the players think he's nuts. Only 2 of them join him, and one of them's Mekhi. Mekhi was dedicated. And I was like, well, we have to see that, right? It would show, and it's showing. So they said that, Robert Saleh said, other than that July 4th weekend, he'd been with the Jets doing what I'm about to say. But let's remember that July 4th weekend, he was working with Duke Manyweather as well. So this dude hasn't stopped. This dude's just kept going. So he said that we felt really good that Mekhi was here again, that all the time, but July 4th, working with our doctors, our trainers, the strength and conditioning staff to do what was needed to regain functional strength and stabilize his knee, get him prepared to play football. And he said it's a credit to him. It's a credit to what he's put forward. And again, as you guys remember, I mentioned I'd kind of, was agreeing a little bit with Hughes had said, with what Connor Hughes had said back in June, that, if Mekhi had shown up at ideal weight then, they would have made a point of it, right? He made a good point. They made the point of pointing out everything else that came to target, right? People talking about Wilson looking beefier, all these different things, the offense looking more functional, all these different things. What it came up and it didn't, and then all those reports came up of him being overweight. And like we said, we know the plays there on the field, so he's showing it, right? So Robert Saleh continued on Mekhi Becton losing weight, just literally said, it's about him getting himself into football shape. He said he's a gifted athlete, he's a gifted man, he's excited about the direction he's going. And then he said, we all have ways to go, we all have to work. Obviously, yeah, Mekhi Becton everyone can get in better shape. That's basically what he said. He said we all can work to get better, but he definitely took a big step forward. And that's the big thing here, him taking a big step forward. So other big news came out as well. And if you guys remember, I mentioned that I figured George Fant would stay at left tackle, which made the most sense to me, and Mekhi would play right. And that doesn't mean Mekhi will never play left again. And that's important, and we need to talk about that, because that's 100% true. What I, again, hope would happen is exactly what has happened. They've announced, and Robert Saleh literally said it. He confirmed it by saying, I have it right here, that, give me 1 second, guys. Here we go. So he confirmed that George Fant will be playing left tackle and Mekhi will be playing right. But he added, and I figured the same kind of thing. We don't want these guys jumping back and forth. You don't want, unchemistry on an offensive line. The most important thing, and I thought about this as well, and it's why I said George at left, Mekhi at right? It just makes sense. I was like, George had a great year at left tackle, especially in pass protection. He looked more natural there than he'd ever looked anywhere else before. And that was his first year really heavily playing left tackle, especially in this system. So why wouldn't he be just as good next year, right? And you want good pass protection there. And Mekhi can do it all. And the point is, and Robert Saleh pointed this out as well, because Mekhi is young, he can move around. So he added that. He said, we don't want these guys jumping back and forth. We made a decision that was best for the team. pointed out, like I said, that George had a fantastic year last year and that Mekhi is a gifted young man who can play both positions, and he added and ended with, this is important. A lot of people, I know it's going to happen, and I bet you're seeing it. Now that they're saying Mekhi Becton is playing right tackle, a lot of people are saying, oh, we're paying all this money for a right tackle, right? Are we going to renew a right tackle? Well, just because he's playing right tackle now does not mean he will continue to play right tackle in his future. And I want to point out that Robert Saleh confirmed that. He ended it by saying, again, Mekhi is a gifted man who can play both positions, but it doesn't mean that Mekhi's left tackle days are over. He added that. Again, George was great this year. Last year. He may be great this year. He's not a young dude. Mekhi is. Maybe they give Jordan 1 year, putting names together. Maybe they give Fant another contract after this, a big one for a year, right? A 1-year contract, and maybe Mekhi beats him out in the offseason. Or maybe down the road, we don't know. But the point is, he pointed out that his days there aren't over. So again, Mekhi is playing right tackle. George Fant's playing left. But there's something else I importantly want to point out. So again, in Robert Saleh's interview, excuse me, after he was asked all about, who was playing left tackle, right tackle, and kept going on with this, after, 3 or 4 questions were asked, he kind of, in a way, almost answered a different question. And he said, I want to make something clear. And he started to point out, and I think this was interesting, and he makes a valid point here. Robert Saleh started to go on and say that in the NFL now, in the nowadays NFL, he felt there isn't that big a distinction as there used to be between left tackle and right tackle. He started to explain that, back in the day, teams would use a certain guy on the right end or a certain guy on the left end, and you wanted this or that. But he said nowadays it's about matchups. And it made a lot of sense. He said nowadays it's all about matchups and exploiting those matchups. So if you're weaker guys on the right tackle, I think he made the joke of I think it was Von Miller, I'm pretty sure. I think he's they're not going to put Von Miller on the other side to exploit a matchup just because that's not his natural. It doesn't work like that anymore, and he made a valid point. So he makes a good point about how, this idea of Mekhi on the right side doesn't mean he'll get big money or doesn't mean he'll continue his NFL career and eventually move to the left. I think he made a valid point with that, but again, saying that first, that his days aren't over there. He could totally be a left tackle, but I think he made a really good point of how the whole offensive line is important. And I do want to add this, because this really excited me. Again, they kept kind of hounding him about it, so he went on to add that personally, he's excited, he said. He said, personally, I'm excited about the right side of that offensive line. He said, you've got a couple of all-pros, potential all-pros there, in my opinion. He said, 2 fantastic young players. And then you've got 2 veterans on the other side. So he pointed that out as well, right? You got George Fant and Lakin, who are 2 veterans who are going to jive well together. And Lakin already is a Pro Bowler. And, Fant is coming off a fantastic season at left tackle. And he's now active now. If you haven't heard, George Fant is now active and activated to the roster, as everyone else has been, as Carl Lawson, as Mekhi Becton. Then on the right side, you got the young guys, right? You got AVT and you got Mekhi Becton, 2 guys with a lot of potential to break out. So he pointed out that he thought that was cool. He really thought it was cool the way the chemistry of that offensive line is. And I think he's right, man. I think we're going to have, and I'm saying it here now, I think the Jets are going to have one of the best offensive lines this year in the NFL. Because like the whole point of this episode's been, that we've been talking about, Mekhi is back, baby. I've been saying it. I was telling you guys back a month ago, right? That this kid's going to show his dedication. Because everything I've seen from him, and if you remember, that's why I was always torn, right? I was torn because I'm I've always seen dedication from him, hard work ethic from him. So he's proving that. He's come back in shape. Again, not perfect, but he's getting there. Remember I said that as well a month ago. You can't lose healthily. You can't healthily lose all that weight in a month. But you can start, right? You can show, again, the dedication to the craft, to the game, to the fans, to the team that drafted you 11th overall. And I believe Mekhi Becton has done that, and he's going to show everybody wrong. Said it back then, and I'll say it now. It is Mekhi Becton redemption season. Get ready for it.